the character of these women, right? Especially this group that's been here, that's gone through all of this, and then the ones that we've brought in with O and Che and AP. I mean, these are women who care about winning. These are women who care about one another. These are women who sacrifice every single day.
The Indiana Fever walked into their matchup with the Los Angeles Sparks, expecting a tough battle. But nobody could have predicted the storm that unfolded. It wasn't just about missed shots, turnovers, or highlight plays. It was about something far more controversial. A referee's questionable calls left fans stunned and players furious, with whispers of favoritism spreading through the arena like wildfire. At the center of it all was Kelsey Mitchell, one of the Fever's most vocal leaders who refused to stay silent. After the final buzzer, when cameras and microphones surrounded her, Mitchell's words cut through the noise with raw honesty. She didn't sugarcoat it. She didn't hide behind cliches. She told the truth as she saw it, and in doing so, exposed what many felt had poisoned the game. But what exactly did she sign? Why are fans calling it one of the boldest moments of her career?
We have a deep team that a lot of players on our team could be playing and they're not, and that's a tribute to our depth, certainly, but also sometimes everybody wants to play, right? And I think the selfless nature of this group just can't be overstated, and that's why we're able to be in positions like this that we're able to be in.
From the opening tip, it was clear this wasn't going to be an ordinary night of basketball. The Fever and the Sparks, two teams clawing for playoff positioning, were locked in a back-and-forth contest. Both squads were missing key players, which only heightened the tension. Every possession carried weight, and every whistle mattered. Yet, instead of the game being decided by the athletes on the floor, fans quickly noticed that the referees seemed to be injecting themselves into the spotlight. Questionable fouls piled up against Indiana, momentum was halted, and frustration was boiling.
Honestly, I think from the start of our season, we talked about a season's not going to be perfect, and if something happens, next woman up. And I feel like that's really been the story of our season. With everything that's happened, people we've added, no matter how late in the season, it's been next woman up. And I think what I love the most about this squad is that, just like O said, like we instill confidence, the coach instills confidence that any shot you take, shoot it with confidence, because we trust you and we trust that you're going to make it. And I feel like that's just really helped us down the line, because no matter who comes in, no matter who steps up, we're all just really happy for each other.
What should have been a showcase of grit and resilience turned into a masterclass in inconsistency by the second quarter. Indiana's bench was on its feet in disbelief. Kelsey Mitchell, usually a composed figure, had already seen enough. Driving to the rim, she absorbed heavy contact with no whistle. Moments later, a much lighter bump on the other end sent a Sparks player to the line. The Fever coaching staff erupted, pleading their case, but the referees stood firm. Television replays only added fuel, showing clear missed calls that favored Los Angeles. Commentators hinted at bias, while fans online began to circulate clips in real time. The game was slipping away not because of execution, but because of decisions from the officiating crew. Mitchell's body language told the story. She shook her head after each sequence, pointing to her arm where contact was obvious, gesturing to teammates as if to say, "What else can we do?" The Fever were being tested in a way that went beyond basketball.
Just the sense of urgency that we played with in those last minutes through some gray area, right? Through some times when it wasn't perfect, and it was a gut check time, and our team stepped up to the challenge.
This wasn't about X's and O's. Anymore, it was about fairness, integrity, and standing up for the game itself. Every time Indiana built a small run, a whistle seemed to cut it short. Every time Los Angeles looked shaky, a bailout foul reset the balance. The tension inside the building grew thicker with every minute. By halftime, social media was ablaze. Hashtags accusing the referees of cheating began trending among WNBA fans. Clips of Mitchell being hacked at the rim with no call were replayed hundreds of times. For supporters of the Fever, it was infuriating. For neutral observers, it was embarrassing for the league. Players are used to tough nights, but when the perception shifts to unfairness, the conversation changes completely. This wasn't just bad officiating, it felt deliberate to many watching still. Mitchell didn't let the injustice derail her completely. Instead, she doubled down on her intensity. Her drives became sharper, her defense tighter, her leadership more vocal. Every missed call seemed to ignite her more, not less. Teammates fed off her fire, responding with physical rebounds and gritty defense. The Fever weren't going to fold, no matter how many whistles went against them. Mitchell's resolve in that storm became the backbone of Indiana's fight. And yet, the most explosive moment hadn't even arrived, because after the final buzzer, when microphones were shoved in front of her, Kelsey Mitchell made it clear she wasn't going to stay silent. What she said next shocked the WNBA world and sparked a debate that still hasn't cooled. When the game ended, emotions were still raw. The Fever had fought tooth and nail despite the lopsided officiating, but the frustration was visible on every player's face. Cameras quickly turned to Kelsey Mitchell, knowing she was the one player who rarely shied away from tough questions. And when the microphones were shoved toward her, she didn't waste time on cliches or carefully polished answers. She spoke straight from the gut. Mitchell began by acknowledging her team's effort, praising her teammates for playing through adversity. But then, her tone shifted. Her voice grew sharper, and her eyes burned with the kind of conviction that only comes from someone fed up. "We came to compete," she said firmly. "But it's hard to compete when the game feels like it's being taken out of our hands." It wasn't a throwaway line. It was a direct accusation that the referees hadn't just made mistakes, they had compromised the spirit of the contest. Her words hit like a lightning bolt. In an era where players are often fined for criticizing officials, Mitchell knew she was walking a fine line. Yet she didn't hold back. She described sequences where obvious fouls went uncalled, questioned why Indiana's players were repeatedly punished for minimal contact, and pointed out how momentum was broken by whistles that never seemed to balance out. She stopped short of naming names, but made it clear she believed the officiating crossed the line from human error into something deeper. Fans watching her interview instantly picked up on the gravity. Social media exploded as clips of her remarks spread across Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Words like rigged and fixed filled comment sections. While Fever supporters praised Mitchell for saying what everyone else was thinking, she became the voice of a frustrated fanbase. The one who dared to say aloud what many had whispered for months about officiating inconsistencies in the league. What made her stance even more powerful was the composure she carried. Mitchell wasn't ranting or screaming. She was calm, deliberate, and precise. That balance between fire and control gave her words even more weight. She looked less like an emotional player lashing out and more like a leader drawing a line in the sand. Her message was clear. If the league wanted to be taken seriously, fairness had to be non-negotiable. Inside the locker room, her teammates backed her up. Several players nodded in agreement when reporters asked if they felt the officiating was slanted. The unity of their response only amplified the controversy. What began as a single postgame quote had now snowballed into a full-on narrative. Indiana didn't just lose a fair fight, they were robbed of one. And yet, Mitchell's remarks weren't just about one game. Her decision to speak out tapped into a bigger conversation around accountability, transparency, and respect for athletes. By breaking her silence, she forced the league to confront a question it could no longer avoid. Was this just bad officiating, or was there something more beneath the surface? That question lingered in the air as the story began to spiral far beyond the hardwood. The moment Kelsey Mitchell's post-game words hit the airwaves, the reaction was instant. Fever fans who had already been venting online now felt validated. They flooded social media with clips of the missed calls, slow-motion replays of hard fouls, and side-by-side comparisons showing how Los Angeles players were given the benefit of the doubt in nearly identical situations. Hashtags like #JusticeForFever and #RefGate started trending, drawing in not only WNBA fans but curious onlookers who don't normally follow the league. Suddenly, the game wasn't just a late-season matchup, it was a flashpoint for a bigger controversy. Sports talk shows picked it up the next morning. Analysts debated whether Mitchell was brave for speaking out or reckless for risking a fine. Some argued that her candor was exactly what women's basketball needed, a no-nonsense leader willing to call out what everyone saw. Others warned that publicly accusing referees of cheating could backfire, painting the Fever as sore losers rather than victims of unfair officiating. Either way, Mitchell's words had sparked a conversation the league couldn't ignore. Media outlets dissected the game film with forensic precision. Clips circulated showing Mitchell driving into traffic, clearly hacked on the arm, with no whistle in sight. On the other end, a Sparks guard barely brushed by a Fever defender and immediately went to the free throw line. Even neutral fans admitted the discrepancy was glaring. ESPN, Bleacher Report, and fan-run podcasts devoted entire segments to the controversy, calling it one of the most poorly officiated games of the season. For Indiana's fan base, the frustration cut deeper because it wasn't an isolated incident. They pointed to earlier games where questionable officiating had swung momentum, suggesting a pattern. Some went as far as accusing the league of protecting certain franchises or star players to maintain ratings. It's whether those theories held weight or not, the perception had taken root. And in sports, perception often matters as much as reality. Mitchell's role in this storm was unique. She wasn't a rookie trying to make headlines or a bench player desperate for attention. She was a veteran, the second leading scorer on her team, and a respected voice in the locker room. That credibility gave her statements added gravity. Fans saw her not just as venting after a tough loss, but as holding the league accountable. To them, she was saying what needed to be said. The Sparks, meanwhile, tried to downplay the drama. Players deflected questions about officiating, choosing to highlight their execution and composure, but the damage was done. Every headline centered, not on the Sparks' win, but on the controversy surrounding it. Even in victory, their achievement was overshadowed as the firestorm grew. The WNBA front office found itself under pressure. Would they discipline Mitchell for her remarks, or would they quietly acknowledge that officiating had crossed a line? That uncertainty only fueled the speculation. Fans weren't just angry about the game anymore, they wanted answers. And if the league stayed silent, it risked confirming exactly what Mitchell had implied, that the system itself was broken. The controversy was no longer just about Indiana versus Los Angeles. It was about trust in the game itself. And with playoffs around the corner, the timing couldn't have been more explosive. In the days following the Fever-Sparks clash, one thing became impossible to ignore: the silence from the WNBA front office. Fans expected a statement, some acknowledgement of the controversy, or even a boilerplate line about reviewing officiating standards. Instead, nothing came. Reporters sent inquiries, team beat writers pressed coaches, and social media continued to buzz with clips of the game, but the league chose not to engage. That silence spoke louder than words, leaving fans to draw their own conclusions. For Indiana supporters, the quiet response felt like confirmation of Mitchell's accusations. If the officiating was truly fair, why not defend it? If mistakes were just human error, why not admit as much? Instead, the absence of transparency created a vacuum filled with speculation. Some believed the league was protecting referees from further scrutiny. Others suggested a darker possibility that bias, whether intentional or subconscious, was woven into the fabric of certain matchups. The lack of clarity only emboldened Mitchell's supporters. Fever fans launched online petitions demanding accountability, calling for an official review of officiating practices. Commentators on sports radio echoed those demands, with several pointing out that the NBA has long published last 2-minute reports reviewing late-game calls. Why, they asked, couldn't the WNBA adopt a similar practice to build trust? Every hour that passed without a response from the league amplified the controversy. Meanwhile, Indiana's players closed ranks around Mitchell in practice. Teammates voiced support, echoing her message in subtle but pointed ways. Veteran voices reminded the media that the WNBA had been pushing for legitimacy and equal respect for years, and that ignoring such blatant officiating controversies undercut that progress. Even opposing players chimed in quietly on social media, liking posts that criticized the referees. While they didn't speak directly, the digital nods suggested Mitchell's frustrations were shared beyond just the Fever locker room. The Sparks organization remained cautious. Their coaching staff brushed off officiating questions, repeating that both teams had to play through tough calls. But privately, league insiders admitted that even Los Angeles players were surprised at the imbalance of whistles. The win, instead of boosting the Sparks' momentum, had been tainted. Rival fan bases mocked them, suggesting the victory had been gift-trapped. The most striking part was how quickly the controversy overshadowed everything else. A pivotal game with playoff implications became remembered not for on-court execution. Television segments, podcasts, and online shows stopped discussing box scores and started asking larger questions about credibility. For a league fighting to expand its audience, that was a dangerous narrative to let grow unchecked. And yet, through all of this, Mitchell herself never backtracked. She didn't soften her words in the following days, didn't apologize, and didn't try to walk the comments back. Instead, her silence off the court carried its own weight, as if daring the league to either punish her or admit she was right. That standoff created a sense of anticipation. Fans waited for the other shoe to drop. Would the WNBA crack down on her? Or would they finally address the elephant in the room? The longer the league hesitated, the more Mitchell's stance looked like courage instead of recklessness. And that shift only raised the stakes, setting the stage for what would happen next, because this controversy was no longer just about one game. It was about the future of trust in the WNBA. While the controversy raged outside the locker room, inside, it was Kelsey Mitchell who held the Fever together. Younger teammates looked to her for guidance. Veterans nodded in solidarity, and the coaching staff quietly recognized that her words had galvanized the group. This wasn't just about calling out referees, it was about sending a message that the Fever would not be pushed around, on or off the court. Mitchell's leadership took center stage, and it revealed why she has long been considered the emotional heartbeat of Indiana. For years, Mitchell has been known as a scorer first. Her lightning-quick first step, ability to create off the dribble, and fearless three-point range have made her a nightmare for defenders. But leadership isn't just about points on the board. In moments of adversity, when teammates feel the weight of bad calls or hostile environments, it's the voice that steadies the group. Mitchell provided that voice. She didn't let her teammates dwell on the unfairness. Instead, she channeled their frustration into energy, reminding them that resilience can win games even when whistles don't. Players like Lexi, Hull, and Aaliyah Boston later reflected on how Mitchell's fire during huddles pushed them to dig deeper. She didn't sugarcoat the situation, but she also didn't allow it to become an excuse. "Control what we can control," she kept repeating. Those words became a rallying cry. Every possession after a missed call became an opportunity to answer with toughness rather than sulking. That mentality carried Indiana through stretches where other teams might have unraveled. Fans noticed it too. Clips of Mitchell barking instructions, clapping her hands, and motioning teammates into sets spread across social media alongside the controversial highlights. To Fever supporters, she looked like more than just a player. She looked like a general commanding her squad through chaos. Her post-game remarks didn't come out of nowhere. They were the culmination of 90 minutes of visible, emotional investment in keeping her team locked in. What stood out most was the balance between passion and composure. Mitchell was fiery, yes, but she never crossed into recklessness. She didn't earn a technical foul, despite multiple missed calls, a testament to her ability to walk the line between protest and control. That restraint allowed her to be heard after the game without being dismissed as simply losing her cool. It was leadership sharpened by years of experience, showing that she knew exactly when to push and when to steady. For the Fever organization, this was an inflection point. A star player willing to put her reputation on the line for fairness while also keeping her team unified is rare. Mitchell wasn't just protecting herself, she was standing up for the collective. In doing so, she set a standard that resonates. Far beyond one night in Los Angeles, her leadership transformed the controversy into something more powerful, a statement of identity. The Fever are not a team that will stay silent in the face of unfairness. And as the storm grew, Mitchell's voice became the one fans and teammates trusted most, setting the tone for what Indiana would fight for in the weeks to come. By the time a week had passed, the controversy surrounding Kelsey Mitchell's comments had grown too big for the league to ignore. Talk shows, podcasts, and national media outlets were still covering it daily, and every highlight package of that Fever Sparks game carried the same headline: "Referees Under Fire." For a league that prides itself on progress and growth, the narrative was damaging. Fans weren't talking about playoff races or star performances. They were talking about trust, fairness, and the integrity of the game. The WNBA suddenly had no choice but to confront the storm Mitchell had ignited. Behind the scenes, reports suggested that the league quietly reviewed officiating tapes from the game. While no official statement immediately surfaced, whispers began circulating that referees would face additional evaluations heading into the postseason. Some insiders hinted that the league was preparing new training sessions to address consistency, while others believed the controversy might finally push leadership to consider publishing officiating reports. Similar to the NBA's last two reviews, whatever the truth, one thing was certain: Mitchell's words had planted a seed that could no longer be buried. For players across the league, her stand became a rallying point. Several veterans liked posts that praised her courage, while younger players privately admitted they admired her willingness to risk criticism for speaking out. In a league built on resilience and advocacy, Mitchell's defiance fit right into the culture. This wasn't just about one player venting, it was about the WNBA's athletes demanding the same transparency and accountability their NBA counterparts often take for granted. Fans took it even further. Online communities began dissecting officiating across multiple games, highlighting patterns they believed showed favoritism or bias. Video compilations spread across platforms, amplifying every questionable whistle from the season. Its fevers. Fan base became especially vocal, insisting that if the league wanted respect from a growing audience, officiating credibility had to be a priority. Their voices were loud enough that national journalists picked up the story, framing Mitchell not as a troublemaker but as a leader pressing for reform. The Sparks organization, stuck at the center of the storm, also felt the pressure. Although they defended their win publicly, the constant chatter about gifted calls undercut their momentum. What should have been a morale-boosting victory instead carried an asterisk in the eyes of fans. Even Sparks supporters quietly acknowledged that the game had been overshadowed. In that sense, Mitchell's stance didn't just elevate the Fevers. Fetich shifted the spotlight entirely. The irony was striking. A league that had been hesitant to give the Fever attention suddenly found them at the center of the conversation, not because of a highlight reel or star power, but because of a demand for fairness. Mitchell had forced the WNBA into a corner, and the longer they delayed in responding, the more her words gained credibility. What began as frustration in a post-game interview had snowballed into a movement that was reshaping the narrative around officiating in women's basketball. And as the Fever prepared for their next matchup, one question loomed over every press conference and practice session: would the league finally act? Or would Mitchell's defiance mark the start of a larger reckoning? If the WNBA's silence left a void, Fever Nation filled it with volume. Fans in Indiana and across the league's growing community turned Kelsey Mitchell's stand into something bigger than a single soundbite. Social media timelines lit up, with tributes calling her the voice of the voiceless and the backbone of the Fever. Every clip of her calm yet cutting post-game remarks was replayed thousands of times, often paired with slow-motion footage of the missed calls that had sparked the controversy. To Fever fans, Mitchell wasn't just speaking truth to power, she was defending them. To Dot inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse, the energy felt different. When Mitchell's name was announced in pre-game introductions, the roar of the crowd was louder than ever. Signs and banners popped up around the arena with slogans like "Next Woman Up," "Next Whistle Fair," and "We Stand with Kelsey." Fans weren't just there to cheer for points and rebounds anymore. They were making a statement. They wanted the league. To see that their loyalty couldn't be bought or quieted, the Fever players felt that wave of support immediately. Younger athletes like Lexi Hull and Nalissa Smith commented on how the fan response gave them a surge of pride. "It feels like the city's riding with us," one player said in a locker room interview. That solidarity helped turn a controversial moment into a unifying one. Instead of fracturing under the weight of officiating drama, Indiana found its identity sharpened. They were now the team that refused to bow down, the squad willing to challenge both opponents and the system itself. Nationally, the story gained traction beyond traditional sports circles. Articles and mainstream outlets framed Mitchell's comments as a fight for fairness in women's sports, drawing comparisons to past moments where athletes stood against perceived injustice. Influencers and celebrities who rarely discussed the WNBA retweeted highlights, praising her courage. Overnight, Mitchell became not just a star guard, but a symbol of athlete empowerment, the Fever's next home. Game showcased just how deeply fans had bought in. Merchandise booths reported spikes in Mitchell jerseys, and chants of "let them play" echoed through the arena after every questionable whistle. What might have started as frustration had transformed into a grassroots movement. Fans felt ownership of the fight, and Mitchell's words became the rallying cry. Even rival fan bases joined in. Seattle Storm and New York Liberty supporters, often critical of Indiana, acknowledged that Mitchell had a point. They, too, had witnessed questionable calls in their games. That cross-team acknowledgement amplified the demand for accountability. Suddenly, the issue wasn't framed as Fever versus Sparks, but as players and fans versus a system that needed fixing. By this point, the league couldn't treat the situation as an isolated controversy. Mitchell's stance had tapped into something deeper, an audience hungry for fairness, transparency, and respect. Fever Nation had turned her words into a movement. And the question was no longer whether she would be punished for speaking out. The question was whether the WNBA could keep ignoring a fan base that had found its voice, and as Indiana looked toward the postseason, that voice only grew louder, ready to carry the team and Mitchell into battles far bigger than basketball. The fallout from Kelsey Mitchell's bold stand did more than ignite debate. It reshaped the narrative surrounding both the Indiana Fever and the league itself. For Indiana, the controversy acted like a spark, transforming frustration into fuel. Players who might have sulked after the Sparks game instead leaned on one another with renewed intensity. Practices became sharper, communication on the floor grew louder, and the team carried itself with a chip on its shoulder. Mitchell's refusal to stay silent gave her teammates permission to channel their anger into purpose. It was no longer just about winning basketball games. It was about proving they could rise above adversity. The timing couldn't have been more critical. With the Fever locked in a tight playoff race, the margin for error was razor thin. Yet, instead of collapsing under the weight of questionable officiating and media noise, Indiana seemed to embrace the role of underdogs, fighting against more than just opponents. Fans noticed the difference. Crowds grew louder, more engaged, as if each rebound or three-pointer was another strike against injustice. The Fever weren't simply chasing victories, they were carrying the pride of a fan base that felt wronged and wanted redemption on the scoreboard. For Mitchell herself, the episode elevated her profile across the league. Long known as a dangerous scorer, she was now recognized as a leader, unafraid to take risks off the court. That dual-identity fearless competitor and outspoken truth-teller cemented her as a face of the franchise. Sponsors, analysts, and fans suddenly spoke of her in the same breath as the league's most influential voices. What began as raw honesty in a post-game interview became a defining moment in her career. But perhaps the most lasting impact was felt at the league level. The WNBA, eager to grow its audience and prove its legitimacy, now faced a credibility test. Could fans trust the product if officiating controversies lingered without accountability? Mitchell's comments had forced that question into the spotlight, and silence was no longer an option. Insiders reported that league officials were considering reforms, from additional referee training to transparency measures modeled after the NBA's review system. While no sweeping changes were announced immediately, the pressure was undeniable. Mitchell had pushed the league into a corner, and fans were watching closely to see what would happen next. The irony was that a game, overshadowed by controversy, may have planted the seeds for growth. The Fever emerged stronger, their culture forged in adversity. Mitchell became a symbol of leadership. And the WNBA, even if reluctantly, had to confront its vulnerabilities. What looked like a black eye for the league had the potential to spark reforms that would benefit players and fans alike. In the end, the Fever's fight wasn't just about wins and losses. It was about demanding fairness, respect, and recognition. Thanks to Kelsey Mitchell's courage, Indiana's season gained a new identity, one defined not by excuses, but by defiance. And as the postseason loomed, that identity made them more dangerous than ever. The clash between the Indiana Fever and the Los Angeles Sparks will be remembered less for its final score and more for what it exposed. Kelsey Mitchell's decision to speak openly about the officiating wasn't just an emotional outburst, it was a turning point. She gave voice to frustrations fans had carried for years, transforming a single game into a conversation about fairness, accountability, and respect for athletes. In doing so, she elevated herself from star guard to fearless leader, willing to risk backlash to protect the integrity of the sport. For Indiana, the controversy forged a new identity, a team that thrives under adversity and refuses to stay silent. When wronged, for the WNBA, it was a wake-up call that transparency matters as much as talent. And for fans, it was a reminder that resilience and courage can turn even the most frustrating night into the foundation of something bigger.